Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of our Visiting in Vignettes. Today, we are going to talk about sleep and cardiovascular disease, and we have a wonderful guest who I'll introduce in a minute. This is a short 25-minute webinar giving the patient perspective. So I want to let everyone be aware, and we are sending out social media posts on this also. It is World Narcolepsy Day. So we want to thank you all for joining us on World Narcolepsy Day. Did you know that sleep disorders are linked to heart disease? You'll hear a little bit more about that today. We would also like to thank Jazz Pharmaceuticals for supporting this educational program. So now I'm going to have a conversation with Jelissa Suarez, who has been lovely and agreed to come and talk to us today. Thank you, Jelissa, so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So can we start out by you telling us a little bit about yourself and your history with sleep disorders?
So a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Rhode Island, have been in South Carolina most of my adult life, so I consider myself a South Carolinian. Let me see. I went to college, majored in bio and public health, worked for several years, and decided to go school. Shortly before starting med school,
We're losing your sound just.
There were a lot of challenges in medical sciences, and now a master's in medical sciences and involved in research, and I'm just very excited to be here.
Well, that is a wonderful background. Now, you have had experience with having a sleep disorder yourself. How did that come about, and how did you get an accurate diagnosis?
So I've always been a sleeper since I was a child. I remember being 4 to 6 years old, and mom would get in the car, I would get in the passenger seat, and within a few minutes I was out. I mean, it was like my bed away from home, and I would wake up again whenever we would get to our final destination. But I was sleepy most of my life. I took naps. It was never disruptive. It was around the time that I was studying for the MCAT. I was at a coffee shop and I had a good night's rest and I could not stay awake. Like, I just felt like my body was shutting down, and I thought, okay, like, this is not okay. I went to my car and I fell asleep right away, slept for like 45 minutes, came back, and I thought, this is a problem. Like, I'm not going to get through school. I'm not going to get through life or anything if I continue like this. So I went to my doctor. It had been a few years that I was complaining about just being very tired. We talked about exercising and mood disorders, and regardless of being well in every single way, I kept on having these episodes. So she finally scheduled me for a sleep study, and that's where I was diagnosed.
Wow. That's it's interesting that a lot of people have different symptoms and they have different experiences, and yet you just chalk it up a lot of times to being tired, or just that's the way I am. And so you were living like this since you were little.
Well, I felt like I was lazy.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I just wanting to nap all the time?
Which is, when you think about sleep disorders, a lot of times people who have sleep disorders get labeled as things like lazy, or like there's something wrong with them, or even sometimes intoxicated, when in fact that's not the case at all. And there's a lot of stigma that comes with having a sleep disorder. How has that affected you in your life? Have you felt that that has been an impact?
I think for me, it's not so much me being affected by how I'm being stigmatized, but me being affected by the way I view myself.
Mm.
And so, again, before I was diagnosed, I felt like I I lacked self-control, I lacked self-will, I wasn't disciplined enough, and there was a lot of self-sabotage that came with it. Once I was diagnosed, I felt a sense of relief, and I think the blame lessened. Um, but I did carry a lot of guilt and shame for not being able to perform at a level that maybe other people could.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of people will be not glad that you suffered with that self talk, but that a lot of people who have sleep disorders feel that way. They either feel that way about themselves or they're labeled by other people. And I think it is helpful to hear you say that because I think they really can understand that this is not about them. They
Mhm,
actually have a sleep condition that is affecting them in this way. And it's nice for other people to have some awareness about that as well and be more compassionate, hopefully.
mhm.
Um, so there are different types of sleep disorders. There's narcolepsy that involves cataplexy, which is when you randomly can fall asleep or get very sleepy. And there's also sleep inertia,
Mhm.
or it's idiopathic hypersomnia. So how did you get an accurate diagnosis and what can you tell us a little bit about those conditions?
Yeah. Um, so there are many sleep disorders. One category of sleep disorders are known as like primary central disorders of hypersomnolence. They're primary because they're considered to be cerebral or from the brain. And those disorders include narcolepsy type 1, narcolepsy type 2, idiopathic hypersomnia, and Klein-Levin syndrome, which is the most rare out of all four. Um, and so their common ground is that they are all characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness. In addition to that, they present unique features. And so, like you had mentioned, narcolepsy type 1 with the cataplexy, which is essentially like muscle paralysis, like your muscles just fall asleep. Um, and then with narcolepsy type 1, there's also a lot of disrupted sleep. They also have a lot of like sleep paralysis, and they also deal with hallucinations, whether it's when you're waking up, or when you're going to bed. With idiopathic hypersomnia, um, that condition is commonly known for very long sleep time. So, I mean, people can sleep 10 plus hours and wake up and then still take a nap and still feel tired. It's also known for something called like sleep inertia, as you had described. And there are other names to sleep inertia. Another name is like sleep drunkenness. And essentially, it's you not being able to wake up in the morning. Like it doesn't matter how many alarms you set, how much ice you pour on your face, like you just cannot wake up. And once you are awake and you're out of bed, your brain still feels asleep. Like
Mhm.
you kind of feel like you're in this surreal state, and that's known as brain fog. Like you're awake, but you're not awake. And I will say, for the longest time in my life, waking up in the morning was probably one of the most difficult things I did every day. Um, So I mean, obviously there's a lot more to the sleep disorders, but that's a good way to kind of distinguish them. They're known for excessive daytime sleepiness and they have unique features.
Yeah. Well, that I feel like that's a very clear definition of them. That's very helpful.
And then narcolepsy type 2 is kind of like a blend between narcolepsy type 1 and idiopathic hypersomnia.
Okay. Yeah. Because most people don't even realize there are different types of narcolepsy or different types of sleep disorders like that. I
Mhm.
mean, most people hear of sleep apnea, but they have no idea about these other types of sleep disorders. So thank you for describing them for
Yeah.
us. Now, we know that sleep disorders can have an effect on the heart for a variety of reasons, but one reason is they have the potential to raise blood pressure because you don't get into that deep sleep. You don't have a good night's rest, and so your blood pressure doesn't get a chance to um, go down or like someone without a sleep disorder would have happen. And so with knowing that, what are the kinds of things that concerned you, and what steps did you take to help prevent having heart disease from a sleep disorder?
Mhm. So I want to start off by saying, yes, that's very true about like blood pressure regulations. Um, like a lot of sleep disorders are associated with um, heart conditions like high blood pressure and all of that stuff. I would say for me, with idiopathic hypersomnia, so with sleep disorders, there's an increase chances of heart condition because of maybe disruption in sleep, but also the medications that are taken. Um, Many of the medications that are prescribed for narcolepsy and also IH can raise blood pressure and cause heart conditions. One of them are stimulants. We know stimulants are known to increase heart rate and blood pressure. The other one is sodium containing medications that can also increase blood pressure because of the increased salt in your system. So for me, that's very alarming because heart health is just so important and there's so many things that can affect it. So for me, I try to stay as active as I can. Um, Being active is not just exercising, it's just moving. Like if you can move around your house, go up and down the stairs, walk around the neighborhood, whatever it is, that's better than just sitting down. The other thing is like being very mindful of how much salt I take in, because I know that I'm already taking stuff that's increasing the salt in my body. Um, Drink lots of water. Try to eat as healthy as I can. It's never perfect, but as long as you try and you keep at it, it's better than doing nothing. Um, Another big one that I feel like it's underrated is stress.
Mhm.
Um, I would say learning how to manage stress better, uh, trying to take like a laid back approach on things that happen, taking your work seriously, but not taking yourself too seriously. I mean, just so many little things like to help reduce stress. And then the last thing, which idiopathic hypersomnia kind of allows me to do, is taking naps. And naps is good for your heart health.
Yes.
So if you can take naps, naps is great for the heart.
Yes. Yes. And it's hard, it's hard for a lot of people to take naps. And we also don't structure our work and our lives around naps, which is some they do in some other cultures, which so it's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
shame. We could really use that little rest time in the day, but we tend to go
Mm-hmm.
here. So that what is one of the things, so through all of this process, what is one of the things that surprised you the most? And I guess added to that, what is one of the myths that you would like to dispel about living? Let's do surprise you the most first. What is one of the things that has surprised you the most about sleep disorders?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many of them. So, which makes them very fascinating and interesting, but again, they are very disruptive. On a high note, I would say that my sleep disorder helped me slow down
Mm.
to because I knew that my time was limited. I didn't have as much time as the average person. So, it really forced me to think about what I valued and my priorities and how I wanted to invest my time, because I didn't have time to do everything. Um, and so I would say that's one of the good things that came from something that would be considered bad, or a deficiency. And then the other thing that really surprised me too about the sleep disorder was that um, it's something that I was going to live with the rest of my life. Like when I was diagnosed, I thought, okay, whatever, I have IH. Like, surely somebody will give me a prescription and I'll just be normal again. I mean, I thought about it like, I don't know, getting a shot of insulin or, and then I quickly realized that no, like even with medication and lifestyle changes and changes in my mindset, my disorder was going to stick around. But I will say medications, lifestyle, and mindset do play a huge role in the extent that it has a control in your life and how you carry out your life, even though you feel you have something that you feel is holding you back.
Yeah. Well, I think learning some of these things is good for any of us. With the slowing down is good for all people to
Mhm.
learn. So it's interesting that this caused you to kind of realize that. And then, there are a lot of people, many who will be watching this visiting vignette, who live with chronic conditions, and they are lifelong, and sometimes it's hard to get that through our head. We have to manage this. We have to take responsibility and ownership of it. It doesn't have to define us, but we do
Mm-mm.
have to manage it our entire lives. And so that is something that catches people off guard. I know a lot of times with heart disease as well as sleep disorders. So,
I
there are a
mean,
lot.
and it shouldn't define you.
Right.
It's just a part of you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's like, how can I embrace this as much as possible
Right.
rather than be miserable?
Right. Yeah, and we call it the empowered patient, and we really believe
Huh.
that people should take charge of their own health, take responsibility for it, and do what they can with their own health. You don't have to be defined or a victim of a disease, and that's a very good lesson for all of us, no matter what we are dealing with.
Mhm.
So there are many myths out there about sleep disorders. What is the one that bothers you the most, or you'd like to clarify for everyone listening?
Is there a specific myth you have in mind?
I think when I think about it, and when I was first
Be-
talking to people about this, the myths about people with narcolepsy, that they
Mhm.
just, that it's a disease that they maybe could have more control over, or they don't understand why this happens to people, and people laugh about it. I think it becomes a more of a funny thing, and it's not funny at all to people living with it. So that's what I think about when I think about myths.
That's actually a really good one. Yeah, I think for people that really don't fully understand the sleep disorder, in this case, like narcolepsy or idiopathic hypersomnia, they view it as a weakness.
Mhm.
Like it's not the disorder that makes you fall asleep or be tired, it's you. Like just snap out of it. Um and I mean, I think the only way to kind of get rid of that myth is, being able to sit down or pull aside that one person and just try to educate them as much as possible. Like, and try to just like put them in your shoes. Um, so yeah, that's actually a really good one.
Yeah. Well,
I'll say I experienced that with my mother. Before I had gotten the diagnosis, she would tell me like, you can't be sleeping all the time. Like, how are you going to get through school? Um, like, I don't know, drink coffee or so I yes. I would say that's the best way to kind of get rid of that myth, is just to educate and just to be patient. People are ignorant because they choose to be ignorant, but there's also ignorance because they just haven't been educated enough on the topic. And so, just be patient and compassionate towards those individuals, and just try to explain it to the best of your ability.
Yes. Well, now we have dispelled that myth, so thank you
Mhm.
for helping us do that.
Yes.
So I just have one more question for you, but there's a question in Q&A, and I'm going to encourage all of you listening to please put your questions in the Q&A section versus please don't put them in the chat, because then we won't see them as well. But you can put questions and we'll read them out for Jelissa in the Q&A box. We'd love to answer your questions.
Yes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions people may have. And if questions arise after the webinar, I'd be happy to, share my email.
Well, that will be wonderful. So my last question is, what is your one piece of advice, if you could give people who are dealing with sleep disorders and maybe heart disease, one piece of advice, what would you suggest?
Honestly, I feel like the advice that I would give would be the advice that I would give to anyone with a chronic condition or anyone that's dealing with something. Um, I feel like sometimes we are our own worst enemies. So, just never let fear or shame or guilt holding you don't ever let that hold you back from being the best version of yourself. Like if you feel like your provider is not doing enough to manage your condition, research someone else, ask around. Like don't settle for less. If you feel like you require accommodations at work or at school or elsewhere, request those accommodations. Like if that's what you need to be successful, they're going to realize that it has nothing to do with your work ethic. As long as the environment is conducive for you to work, they're going to see the changes in the way you execute what you're doing, whether it's school or work, anything else. We all have a unique story that is worth sharing and living. So don't ever look at it as being something bad. Just be proud of where you are, and again, just try to make the best of it. I know it's easier said than done, and it's an internal battle, but I think once we all get there, we would feel a lot better. And then I would say the other thing is, like, I feel like a lot of quotes and verses kind of helped me on my journey of learning how to manage IH. So one of the verses that really came up quite often is, accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so there are things we can't change, but there are many things that we can. And so identifying those things and just changing them one at a time.
Yes, well, those are wonderful advice, and the variation on the serenity prayer is fabulous. That is one of my favorites as well, and good words to live by for sure. We have one question, and we may not be able to answer it, not giving any medical information or anything like that, but do you know, are there sleep disorders that cause people to have very little sleep, like 4 hours a night?
Oh yeah, insomnia.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
people that have insomnia also have an increased risk of cardiovascular conditions, because people that have disrupted sleep or people that have very little sleep, what ends up happening is your body enters this fight or flight mode. And so, like, your body's just jacked up like your heart rate is going up, your blood pressure is kind of all over the place because your body's not getting its essentials, whether it's enough sleep in the case of insomnia, or like somebody who has like disrupted sleep, whether it's like obstructive sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome. What happens? The brain's not getting enough oxygen. So the brain's telling the heart, okay, I need you to increase your blood pressure so we can get some oxygen. And so that's where you start having like those blood pressure changes.
Well, that is, I didn't even think about insomnia and it should have been obvious, but thank you because that's very
Mhm.
helpful. And we do have to end, but I will just say one of the questions was naps good or bad? And you definitely said yes, yes, naps. So I heard you say that. So the other question is about side effects from medication. We'll try to answer that offline, but because we're at time, I know this goes very quickly, but we want people to be able to do this in their lunchtime easily, and it's designed to be quick. But
Mhm.
I think it's been a wonderful conversation, Jelissa, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I love what Mended Hearts is doing. So
Well,
keep up
thank
the great
you.
work.
Thank you. We will for sure. Everyone have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Bye.